Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday, May 27th, in the year of the plague 2020. A most important couple of segments here. I'm joined by United States Senator Angus King of the great state of Maine and Wisconsin's Representative Mike Gallagher is a weekly guest. Senator King, not as often, but we're glad to have them both. Gentlemen, good morning. Senator King, a special welcome back. Good to have you here. Have you been trapped in the Beltway throughout the virus, or have you been able to get back and forth to Maine?
Hugh, I'm happy to tell you I'm in Maine right now, man, and it's great to be here. Rented a car and drove up at the end of last week. We're here for a week, and it's beautiful. You got to get up here. You got to get up here, Hugh.
I do. You know, your friend and mine, George, has that place waiting for me, so I'm waiting to get up there. Representative Gallagher, I understand that the commission has been undermined by a friendship between you as a Packers fan and Senator King's wife, who is also similarly afflicted.
This is true. I will say, however, I've been working very closely with Senator King for over a year now. I have yet to get the invite for a week in Maine, and you've just got one in 30 seconds.
Well, I got to tell you, China Mike, that should tell you something. I was talking about.
Mike, tell Hugh what I gave you for a wedding present.
Oh, he gave me an amazing photograph of Lambeau Field. It is my prized possession now, proudly displayed in my office, and everyone that comes in has to genuflect in front of it.
Everybody needs a dartboard. Let's get serious, gentlemen. Senator King and Representative Gallagher, I wrote about this because you're executive director of the Cybersecurity Solarium Commission. Admiral Monty Montgomery sent me the executive summary last week. I read it over the weekend. I immediately wrote a column about it. Senator King, very point blank, do you think there's a chance in phase 4, which Leader McConnell said is going to happen, that you'll be able to break through in a bipartisan fashion with Representative Gallagher and get a separate title of that Phase 4 bill devoted to the Cybersecurity Commission's recommendations?
Well, we're going to work at it, Hugh, because it's relevant. I mean, at the time of the pandemic, we're especially vulnerable. Think about it for a minute. Millions and millions and millions of people working from home, and that presents a whole new target space to our adversaries. And there are lots of lessons from the pandemic. In fact, later today or probably tomorrow, we're going to be publishing an appendix to our report based upon lessons learned and thoughts that we have about cybersecurity from the pandemic.
So, Representative Gallagher, let's go back to what we did last week. You alerted me to the fact that the commission had finished its work. You actually alerted me to the fact that the commission existed. I'm not that dumb, but I didn't know about it. I knew about the first Solarium. Would you give a brief overview for the audience as to what it is, what it did, and why this report exists, and then maybe whether or not it can get into phase 4?
Yeah, well, we were instantiated by the National Defense Authorization Act to take a comprehensive look at where we are in cyber, evaluate 3 different approaches going forward in cyber via a competitive process, and articulate a comprehensive strategy for protecting America in the cyber domain. And it is called, as you alluded to, the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, because there's a famous grand strategy design exercise from 1953 where Eisenhower got 3 teams of the best minds of the day to compete against each other, articulating 3 different strategies for how we would compete against the Soviet Union. And so we took inspiration from that, and we also tried to modernize concepts of deterrence for the present day. And we really, in the final report, argue for what we called layered cyber deterrence, which is a comprehensive strategy for how we become a better ally, a worse enemy, and a harder target. And it's really a strategy for how we get the federal government working more cooperatively with the private sector, where the lion's share of the critical infrastructure and the assets and the talents are housed.
So I want to go to the 2 most important of 70-plus recommendations, Senator King. Design a way to better recruit, develop, and retain cyber talent. That would require, if we had this mythical title in phase 4, a separate hiring authority, a separate pay scale. I had Mark Zuckerberg on the show last week. They're hiring all the talent in the world into the Valley and into the large startups. It's very difficult for the federal government to get the people that we need to do cyber defense.
You know what the difference is, Hugh? Public service. People want to think and feel and believe that they're in something bigger than themselves, that it's important, that they're serving their country. And that's why we have the enormous talent that we have in the military services. One of the things we're talking about is a kind of ROTC for cyber talent. where you get college scholarship, college help in exchange for a commitment to serve the country in this field. So we're trying to think as creatively as we can because, like everything else, it's all about talent. It's all about having the right people in the right jobs. But we have found that the call to service is a very important part. And as I say, that's why we have such talented people that we have in the military and in other areas of the government.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, Senator King, but you've also been a governor, so you know that there are the D.C. and every state capital is littered with the reports of commission that have never gone anywhere. Why does this one have a chance of not being the one commission that worked was the Social Security Commission, Daniel Patrick Moynihan made famous. Why does this stand a chance of being that as opposed to the graveyard of commission reports that around us in the Capitol?
Well, I think there are two reasons. One is the urgency of the problem. More and more people, as I talk to my colleagues on other committees and throughout the Senate, people recognize that the cyber threat is real. It's imminent. I said to somebody the other day, this is the longest windup for a punch in the history of the world. We know that it's coming. In fact, it's already happened to us. That's number one. Number two, this commission had a kind of unique structure. There are four members of the commission are active members of Congress on the relevant committees. Mike Gallagher and I are both on armed services. I'm on intelligence. Jim Langerman from Rhode Island is armed services, and Ben Sass is also intelligence and armed services. So it's a strong group within the Congress that are working on this. So, and we're all committed to making it happen. And we've already had a hearing. Mike and I had the uncomfortable experience of actually being witnesses before a Senate hearing last week, and so we're moving forward in a number of areas. We think we just got to make this happen.
Representative Gallagher, one of the things that people don't quite realize is how vulnerable they are. Now, I'm aware of that, and I've kind of given up. I assume because of the people that I talk to online and via my devices that I'm compromised in 100 ways. I just assume no privacy. But a lot of Americans are basically ignorant of the world that is going on around them, the invisible world of conflict. Do you want to sketch that out for them? Because it is actually every state, every local government, every institution is pretty much under attack every day by the bad guys in cyberspace.
Well, to connect it to your earlier question, we really tried to sketch it out in the report, and we deliberately wrote a report that would be accessible to everybody so as to apprise people to the nature of the threat. In fact, if you download the report, which you can for free on solarium.gov, the first 2 pages, even before the executive summary, are a sketch of a futuristic scenario written by Peter Singer and August Cole, who you know as the authors of both Ghost Fleet and the new futuristic novel, Burn In. And in that, we tried to sketch out exactly what a future disastrous scenario would look like because, as Senator King aptly pointed out, such a scenario, it's not years away. It could be months, if not days away. Everybody who has a device, everybody who has something that's connected to the internet is vulnerable. What have we learned in the pandemic? People are even more reliant upon their home internet for critical functions, for working every single day. We had a commissioner on the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, Tom Fanning, who runs a major utility company, energy company, and he said his company is under attack on the order of, and Senator King has the exact number, hundreds of thousands of times every single day. So it's your personal data. It is the utilities we rely upon for water, basic electricity, and of course, it's our most prized state secrets, and it's our intellectual property. Of course, we know now that the Chinese have conducted intellectual property theft on the order of $300 billion, if not more, every single year, what a previous commission, the Blair-Huntsman Commission, called the greatest transfer of wealth in human history. And this threat is only going, and this is what makes this domain unique, is that access to these weapons are not limited to nation states. There are individual bad actors out there who can have the cyber equivalent of a nuclear weapon. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to establish a posture of respectable deterrence in cyberspace so the bad guys don't feel like they can attack us and get away with it.
Hugh, there's one other piece of this that I think that's important. Your question is a really good one. How do we get this done? There wasn't a breath of partisanship in this whole process. Other than the 4 members of Congress, I haven't the faintest idea the party affiliation of the other 10 members of the commission. Partisanship just wasn't there. We had people from the executive, from the current administration. It just is all about trying to get this done. And, that's the way it's working thus far in the Senate. I mean, we had a hearing, as I mentioned, we had Ron Johnson and Gary Peters, no air between them on this issue. And I think that's an important piece of this. And wouldn't it be nice if occasionally we can do something in the public interest that doesn't split along party lines?
Well, we do know that phase 4 has got to pass. I've written this because the states need some help. There absolutely has to be a phase 4, and the leader wants liability protection. So there's going to be a bill. Is it possible? Can you get to work and draft it so you can hand a finished bipartisan product to the leader that says, here's Title X or Title Y or Title Z, whatever the number is, wherever it would come in the bill? Just drop it in. We've got Angus King and Ben Sass here. We'll go and round up 60 votes in the Senate. If it gets through the Senate, we'll get through the House. Senator King, do you think that's possible? Because the door is open, and rarely does the door get open in Washington.
Well, I think that is possible. But the other route, Hugh, is the National Defense Authorization Act, which, as you know, has passed every year for the past, 60 years. And we're already working with the committee. I know that we've made specific proposals along the line you suggest to armed services. So, yeah, I think it is possible, although you never can tell. Mitch may say, no, this has got to be strictly COVID related because I don't want to open the floodgates. But certainly it's one of the options that we're going to pursue.
Mike Gallagher, I think it is COVID related for this reason, in an illusion that you will not understand. In fact, I'll give this to Senator King. You remember the Ollie Frazier fights of our youth, right, Senator? The three great Ollie Frazier fights. And when a heavyweight gets into a bout with a heavyweight, they go in for the kill when they've staggered him. China's got us on the ropes right now. And I really am afraid that right now the Chinese Communist Party delivers a second staggering blow. And if they did so, they would choose to do so in the cyber domain. That's why I think it's related to COVID. I think if we don't defense up against the PRC, we are simply blind to what they are capable of doing. Your comment, Senator.
Well, I think I think you're absolutely right that an attack in this day and age is much more likely to come in the cyber realm than it is kinetic. And that's just one of the realities. So, and we are, they're striking us, or if they did strike us now, it would be at a time of vulnerability. So, I don't disagree with you at all. Through some oversight, I'm not in charge of the Senate, but Mitch has to make these decisions. But I do think it's a possibility that there are a number of our recommendations that can fit into an extra title of the COVID bill, and certainly that's what we're going to try to do. But don't forget, we've got armed services, we've got homeland security. There are lots of pieces to this, but I believe that, as I say, I think my colleagues, we have their attention, number one, and number two, this is a refreshing area where we don't have a lot of partisanship.
I agree. And Mike Gallagher, this is sort of where we are vis-a-vis cyber defense, where we were in December vis-a-vis the virus. There is an alarm sounding. People can choose to ignore it. Unfortunately, a lot of people did about the virus in December. There is no need to ignore this. And I want to go down to what you have in the report about employing the military instrument of power deterrence to punish adversaries and actually lay out the rules for that. What about the rules of publicizing counterattacks in the cyber domain? Because we don't know that they are going on. And I've had this discussion with military authorities before, but what's your opinion about publicizing when we punch back?
Well, if you dig into the report, we certainly advocate more transparency in this space to enhance our deterrent posture. In particular, we're arguing for promulgating a new declaratory policy where we basically say to our adversaries, if you do X, we will do Y and Z. Now, we preserve flexibility for DOD. It's not, paint by numbers. We're going to dictate exactly the response. But we do believe we need to have more transparency when it comes to our willingness to be able to strike back quickly. But also, so much of this is our ability to reconstitute our economy, our military, et cetera, in the wake of a massive cyber attack, which is why we're also recommending something called continuity of the economy planning. If we face that unfortunate event of a massive cyber attack, we want to be prepared prior to it and have the plan ready to go for, okay, this is how we get back online, and this is how we get DOD in a position to strike back quickly along with our allies and partners in a coalition. And so a declaratory policy combined with an enhanced signaling strategy is a key part of ensuring that our adversaries don't feel like they can attack us and get away with it.
Last question to you, Senator King. I don't think you'll get a national cyber director in any, or you won't get the administration support. But absent that, I do think you can stand up the new cloud certifying authority and many other things. Has the administration signaled that if there is an effort to put together a bipartisan bill, that they will support you?
We haven't gotten a clear signal across the board. Obviously, we want to work with the administration. And by the way, I think the National Cyber Director is a favor to the president. It's giving him a center of authority that he can hold responsible. In the old days when I was in business, one of my principles was I want one throat to choke, and that's what we're talking about here. So I haven't given up hope in persuading the administration that this makes sense. The problem is, Hugh, we've got authority for cyber scattered throughout the federal government, and nobody's in charge. And we don't want a situation where everybody's pointing at other people and saying, well, that wasn't my responsibility. So that's the idea of the National Cyber Director, appointed by the president in the executive office of the president, like the trade representative. I think that's very important. The other thing, Hugh, and Mike touched on this, we've got to have a deterrence strategy. Right now, we're a cheap date. Other countries, other actors feel like they can whack us in cyberspace and they're not going to pay any price. Until I want them to sit down in the Politburo and say, man, if we go after them on this, they're going to come after us, and maybe we better not do that. That's what deterrence is all about, and that hasn't been true. And this isn't the Trump administration. This goes back for at least a dozen or 20 years. We've got to have a policy that says if you hit us, you're going to get hit back and you're going to pay a price.
Senator Angus King of Maine, Representative Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, great work on the Cybersecurity Solarium Commission. I hope there is a title in Phase 4. I hope you get this done because it is bipartisan. It's urgently necessary. And I thank you both for joining me this morning.